Hey, everybody, welcome to the Daily Objective. And we're going to be talking about an interesting topic today, a guy who goes by the name of Bronze Age Pervert. I've got a guy here. He's from Greece, and his name is Nikos Rucka. And in fact, he's personally being targeted in a sense by the philosophy of this movement because I think they're trying to take us back to a pre-philosophical era of history. That's my understanding. And when you think about it, yeah, I mean, life did kind of get complicated once people started philosophizing, right? Life was simpler back in the day. So I think there's long been this push on the right or among conservatives. I mean, by definition, they want to kind of hold on to something from the past. Now, conservatives oftentimes have been known to long for, let's say, the 1950s. More recently, we've seen an explicit push by conservatives to go back to like sort of pre-constitutional America or something like that, like pre-pursuit of happiness, Western civilization. They say, yeah, the pursuit of happiness has just sort of led us into this mess. But today we're going to be talking about a movement that, in my understanding, wants to go back to sort of pre-Socratic, pre-Athenian ancient times, the good old days, right? Life was simple. You weren't quite a hunter-gatherer, and you weren't this neurotic philosopher asking what it's all about. You were working out, getting plenty of exercise, going around, invading your neighbors, and enjoying their booty. Here to help me learn more about this is Nikos Rucka.
Thanks, Raga. So the main reason we're going to discuss about the Bronze Age mindset is the book by someone with the nom de guerre, Bronze Age Pervert, is because I think it's one of the most interesting phenomena on the fringes of the right. So first, let's make something clear. Why care about something that happens on the fringes? The reason why we care, or the reason why I care, is not only intellectual curiosity, but I think it's one of these movements that has really managed to capture some of the needs that many of the people who today find themselves without purpose or thinking that the world out there is alienating and is a boring and purposeless place, because quite often it is. So I think it's a very interesting movement. I will not caricature it as something which is, oh, basement dweller, whatever. No, this is a book that, despite all the bad things that it has, it's an interesting book. It's at some points, it's written in a very unique way, quasi-poetic, quasi-sarcastic, and that's what has made it successful. So there have been various people. Yaron did some discussion with Bradley Thompson, where they talk about the problems with Bronze Age mindset, the book and the author. So I don't think there's much reason to go through all these things that are wrong with the book. So let me mention from the beginning, there are many elements that are racist, determinist, sexist. All these things are there. What I'm mostly interested in is what has this book seen as missing today, and what does it offer to people, and what has made it appealing. And by the way, we're going to do the same thing that we do every time we discuss a movement that we don't agree with. So we did also with BLM. We start by what made it appealing and what are some of the points. So first of all, what is the movement about, and what are some of the points that make this movement sound appealing to people? So that's going to be the framework from which I will approach this book and this topic. I've read the book. I've also listened to the audiobook because I've used it on my upcoming tribalism book. So hopefully it's going to be an interesting discussion. And as you see, I have plenty of notes. Probably we're not going to go through all of them, but then we are going also to move it to Clubhouse.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start by asking you, what exactly are these guys on about, huh?
So this book is mostly about the yearning for a different kind of human being, for a different kind of character. So they actually, what they say is there are two human types. The one is a human type that you don't want to be. It's what they call the bugman. And this is the human being of today as portrayed. Imagine the person who is in an office, in a cubicle. He looks a bit pale. He's a bit unfulfilled with life, not very successful with women. He goes back home, he watches Netflix, next day back to work. So this is what they would consider a very unheroic life, a life without having this joy, this frivolous joy of conquest. And this conquest would be either an actual conquest. So you will see some of the heroes presented in the book being pirates, mercenaries, people who would go to become colonizers, so to speak, but also conquer things like art or science, but not in the way that we would consider conquering art and science. Because one of the main premises of the book is that it's not that this joy of life does not come through reason. And let me read you one particular thing which makes clear how does Bronze Age Pervert sees reason. He says, do you imagine that men of genius, or let's say men of science in history, walk around clear-headed, disenchanted, quote, reasonable, with a tight-assed attitude of the scientist, cultist, and materialist? No great discovery has ever been made by the power of reason. And then later he says, all great scientific discoveries, supposedly the great works of, quote, reason, are in fact the result of intuitions and sudden grasp of ideas. So what Bronze Age Pervert invites you to do is liberate yourself from reason and discover this Dionysian fervor. This thing which inside you tells you go out and conquer. And again, it doesn't matter if you conquer a continent or a book or a piece of art, it's this release of the id. So this would be the first and obvious thing where, in my view, BAP goes completely the wrong way, which is, yes, it's good that there is this heroic spirit, and this is part of what makes the book appealing. But by throwing away reason, this sets the ground with everything which is wrong with the book, which is things that we can discuss later. Mostly the biological determinism, but also this will to power for its own sake that leads to things that are not going to be good.
Yeah, and as you're speaking, I'm thinking about how the philosophical premises or lack of philosophical identification of premises in the larger culture sort of are cashed out on by various movements. So the fact that reason itself has not been properly understood by the vast majority of thinkers means really anyone can come along and say, here's what reason is, and I like it or I don't like it. So one guy can say reason basically is, at the end of the day, intuition, and we need to go with it because, you know, that's how science works and that's what we need. On the flip side, you can have someone saying, no, reason is just pure logic that has nothing to do with your innate sort of will and intuition, and we need to get rid of that logical BS. We need is, you know, this Nietzschean drive. And what's interesting to me is like the more you learn about Ayn Rand's early life, she was into Nietzsche, right? And you read The Fountainhead, and Gail Wynand or whoever, I think Gail Wynand is talking about the conquest of nature, and, you know, putting use to all this senseless space. And that spirit is obvious. You know, I think Rand obviously was approving of it. The question is always context. What is right to conquer and what is not? Meaning there's a huge difference between looking at a shitty planet, pardon my French, a planet that is uninhabitable to naked man, and making the planet our B word. I think you can get what I'm saying. As opposed to actually looking at our fellow man and saying, I'm going to conquer this person. I'm going to take his stuff. I'm going to rape his family, etc., enslave his family. There's a huge difference between those two things, and the latter, the conquering your fellow man, that is antithetic to life on Earth, the way that we see it. Reason, however, actual reason, that is starting with sense perception and then forming rational concepts and then applying it to the problems of existence. That is what life requires, and that is what makes life tolerable. Back to you.
Yes, so that's the main, let's say, epistemological universe of the Bronze Age pervert. It's this urge for this Dionysian rebirth. Now, the selling point of the book is basically something which appears already in the first page. And it says that, and this is its biggest appeal, in my opinion, to its audience. The message is that we live in a world of ugliness, mostly, by the way, true. And there's an alternative. And this alternative is the world of beauty. So what it says is, I declare to you with great boldness that I'm here to save you from great ugliness. And then the alternative is that basically that you need to find the way out of this ugliness. And he brings some examples from the Bronze Age or the ancient times, where you come in front of big challenges, and by going beyond these challenges, you find yourself in the other side. So there's very strong the element of mythos, very strong the element of realizing yourself through struggle. So you find many military figures from history, but not only from history. So you find, for example, pirates, ancient Spartan generals. And the thing that they have in common is they go rogue. So for those of you who watched Apocalypse Now, what made Kurtz basically this Dionysian figure is, at some point he was freaked out from the horrors of war, and he set his own tribe in this. It was a community of everyone was doing basically whatever they feel like doing. And because he was the most powerful, he became the king. So this is what, this is, he doesn't mention Kurtz specifically, but this is a constant theme, that the greatest men were those who went to another continent. Let's say Sparta has sent you to another country or another continent. Once you reach that point, you're not anymore part of Sparta. This is now your terrain. You're supposed to run this as a fiefdom. And the idea is that only this makes you free. So his claim is that real freedom is not that what you've sold that freedom is. And he brings this example. He says, look, take a Zuckerberg or take a Bezos. Could they get away with killing someone and stealing their wife? The answer is no. Therefore, they say these guys who are supposedly the super powerful men are less powerful than a tribesman or a leader of a tribe in Africa who can indeed kill someone within this anarchy and, quote, steal his wife. So his idea is that freedom is that if you rely on men with guns, other men with guns, you're not free. So again, we see this Kurt's Apocalypse Now paradigm where freedom is basically the will to power, the will to do whatever you want to do. And also, but here's another issue with the book. Let's say we would live in a dictatorship and someone would arrest BAP and they would put him on a interrogation. There's so much in this book which is joking or sarcasm or BSing that he can switch and say, oh, I wasn't serious with this, but I'm serious with this. So what really this book reminded me, have you heard of the situationist movement in France? A guy called Guy Debord. He was very big in the 1968 revolt. And he wrote The Society of the Spectacle, which was like this new thing in the left. And again, the idea was the old left is boring. Here is this new left, this Dionysian id left. So this is something similar in the right. So the idea is, look, the average conservative, with his belly and his tie, they are cacks, bugmen, whatever. Now here comes the new type of vitality, the new type of virality. This healthy animal, to put it in the way Rand put it, but they would understand something else. And this is why BAP so often, if you see his Twitter account, he posts pictures of a very fit, half-naked man, because the idea is this physical beauty, this kleos, to use the ancient term, is what's going to bring you to the other side. And again, this other side is the potentiality of conquest, the potentiality of a life completely unleashed from any burden, whether this burden be the law or moral ideal. So he's mocking the ideal of individual rights. So the idea is a proper conqueror would never be held back by made-up notions such as rights or equality.
Yeah, well, there's a lot. There's so much. Every one of these discussions is like a choose your own adventure book. I don't know if you had those in Greece, but like you make decisions as you're reading the book, and it can lead you down various paths. Yeah, this lack of differentiation between what's joking and what's true, I think, is a hallmark of our time. Especially, I mean, maybe entirely on the right. I mean, what Donald Trump to me represents, and I'm not linking him to this BAP movement necessarily. I don't know, but for all I know, they might think Trump is a boomer and at best a stepping stone. But
no, we can discuss this.
We'll get to that. Okay, but kind of what he represents, I think, is a large sort of turn towards this trolley politics, where like he's like this artist who just says whatever he feels like, his stream of consciousness. He's a great comedian, sort of, because like he just kind of says what passes through his head, and it can be very funny. But it kind of part of the problem with like the storming of the Capitol in January, in my view, is that I'm not sure the people storming that Capitol entirely were sure if they were kidding or not, right? And like that's what makes it so difficult to deal with what we're seeing about. But there are real life consequences to these things, like when we can't differentiate what's true and what's not, what's sacred, like rule of law, versus what's not, like what isn't. It becomes very difficult to live and to function as a civilization. So yeah, that differentiation between joking and serious that you mentioned, I think is it's this ongoing tool that people have been using, but at a certain point, we do need to be able to communicate clearly and to know when each other is serious. And another thing that occurs to me as you're talking about how, like, in their view, I think you said if you're not free to basically take advantage of people and to hurt them and to do what you want, then you're not really free at all, right? And it just kind of reminds me how in philosophy, all through history, you see this reoccurring theme that, like, if you don't know everything at once from every possible angle, basically, if you're not God, then you don't really know anything, right? Isn't that kind of what skepticism boils down to at the end of the day? If you don't basically know everything at once from every possible angle and every possible respect, then you don't really know it. You only know your little biased version of things. And, similarly, if you're not, you see the argument being made in America, right? If you're not free to own a slave, then you're not free at all, right? Like that's how that type of argument might be used by the BAPsters, if I had to guess. Like, it sounds like that is what they're saying. If you're not free to own a slave, then you're not free at all. So this is why philosophy matters, actually, like defining things properly, identifying fundamentals, and then, dealing with issues like that with clarity is paramount. And without that, and I don't point at the BAP folks and say these guys are what's wrong with the world. I think I see them as a symptom. I see these quote respectable intellectuals, right? The proper intellectual members of society that have failed to confront these issues in philosophy, in ethics, in politics. They have failed to do so, even when offered what I think are very good solutions to these problems. They have failed to do so, and we are seeing the chickens come home to roost. And the consequences are real. If these BAP folks, if their philosophy was widespread, how much longer would we be able to live comfortably and with any security, right? When the world is in basically a state of anarchy, when might makes right, But
here's what they would say. Mm-hmm. There is no virtue in living comfortably. I think the first example that is brought in the book, the first parable, is Empedocles, a figure from ancient Greece, who stands in front of a volcano, and he dives in the volcano because diving in the lava, he would rediscover himself as something else. So this idea is that, look, if you get accustomed to discomfort, then you become this bugman. This eats you from within. And actually, you see also something else which is very common in right-wing reactionary movements. And I will use the term reactionary in the way that these people would consider actually a compliment. So if you go back to Evola, or even before Evola, you see this worry about overpopulation. You see this worry about there are too many people out there. And unfortunately, this today is mainstream. Even the left, actually, particularly environmentalists, many environmentalists are Malthusians. They believe there are too many people. But for this type of ideology, the problem is that with technology, you manage to have all these people living unfulfilling lives, and you have this. It's difficult for this aristocracy to rise. So I forgot to mention in the beginning, but apparently by now it should become obvious that there's a very aristocratic view of the world, which again you find throughout the reactionary right. How does Evola mention one of his latest books? For the aristocrats, guidelines for the aristocrats of the soul, or something like that. So it's a very anti-egalitarian view. And notice, there are two ways to be anti-egalitarian. There's the way that says, look, we need to have equal rights, and beyond that, let the chips fall where they may. But also there's another one that says, no, there's a biological hierarchy. And BAP makes biological hierarchy points throughout the book between different ethnicities, he doesn't talk specifically about race, so he might distinguish, he might say, for example, there's a tradition of freedom in Africa, but there is no tradition of freedom, let's say, in particular parts of Asia or something like that. So this anti-egalitarianism is very strong. By the way, I think Raz says we have a question.
Yeah, Razi wants us to answer, do you guys consider Pepe the Frog a part of alt-right BAP stuff or ever in the past? I don't know if I would put BAP and alt-right in the exact same category. I know you're shaking your head no. And we can get to the differences between those if you like. Obviously, they're not like this, they're not opposites. So my understanding of the whole Pepe the Frog is that some people on the sort of underbelly of the internet said, let's kind of mess with everybody's head. And this kind of brings us back to this this landscape, this sort of culture where it's everywhere, kind of messing with people's mind is sort of the end game, like just people not knowing. And we've gotten to a point now where all day you see like kind of Nazi themed posts online, and it's kind of unclear. Is this just some 11-year-old who's being silly on the internet, or is this a real movement? That's why I look to the intellectual leadership. You know, I look at people like Richard Spencer, Nick Fuentes, and other, you know, and maybe we can look at BAP in his own sort of lane and see, you know, if you can sort of sort through the jokes, what are they actually advocating for? And we have our answer of kind of what this movement is pushing for. So yeah, as far as Pepe the Frog, it was sort of like, haha, let's spread the idea that this frog is a Nazi symbol, and then we'll watch it get banned. Like we'll watch this frog get banned and castigated. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Same, just like the OK sign and various other things. I mean, it's stupid. It's silly. Obviously, they accomplished what they wanted to. I mean, to what end is all of this? In what way does this help anybody? I don't know. But anyway, do you have any more thoughts on that?
Yes, two thoughts. First, on the relationship between the alt-right and BAP. So BAP is critical of the alt-right, particularly as regards to their performative nature. So he's very critical of things like Charlottesville and stuff. And the idea is that you play by the rules of the system by doing this. And what is his alternative? So remember, where does the, in many quotations mark, new right, not in the Reagan way, new right in Nouvelle Droit in France way, which is this new, let's say, identitarian right comes from. It's heavily influenced by the new left in some ways. And part of this is the focus on culture, on what they call meta-politics. And this means that the field of the struggle is not culture. It's not politics. First, you need to delegitimize the dominant ideology. So here's what BAP says. Keep the eye on the task, far from accomplished. To discredit authorities, to mock all public pities, to show the leaders of government, bureaucracy, finance, corporations, big tech, and media for the pathetic ghouls they are. End of quote. And he says somewhere else, the biggest threat the right presented to the system came from something like 4chan, which showed it can be an intelligence agency of its own and far superior to what the formal spooks could do. So it's in a way, how did Ron put it? Killed by laughter. Killed by irony. And again, you can never be sure. In the book, he says some completely ridiculous things like the city of Mexico and some other mega cities in developing countries. We don't even know if it's two cities, maybe some, or the, things that make no sense. But this gives the benefit of the doubt. Do you really mean this, or are you joking? And the answer is, it doesn't matter. We need to create this atmosphere of sarcasm, this atmosphere of irony. Why? Because this is the field where we can win. So the bugmen, there's nothing serious in them, is the idea. Therefore, by mocking them, it's half of the victory. And he brings one particular example. He brings the example of the campaign, quote, "It's okay to be white." And this is very situations, by the way. This is very new left tactic. You provoke by something that if your enemies oppose it, then your enemies are ridiculous. So in France, they had this sticker who says, "It's okay to be right." And of course, it's okay to be white. And what does the left do? They freak out. And then the people who put the sticker says, "Oh, wait, do you mean that it's not okay to be right? White people, see what happens. It's not okay to be right." So in a way, you set the trap and you know that they're going to fall in this trap immediately. So yes, so I don't think, so obviously I have very little doubt that there is a very strong like white ethnocentrism, so to speak, in BAP. Having said that, the examples he uses are not only from white, and also, I don't know if they would consider Saddam Hussein or Sadat or like this Middle Eastern kind of despots as white, but they are part of their, let's say, pantheon. Again, why? Because Saddam was a man who, in a way, did whatever he wanted. And that's why, for example, they talk a lot about the Lion of Damascus. So this kind of Middle Eastern Ba'ath leaders is an example of a modern, let's say, man of, they like the scenes where Saddam is parading with the horses. So there's something in that resembles this lot spirit of the pirate, of the conqueror, of the man who wants space to do his own thing. And again, that's why they like this kind of figures such as Bashar al-Assad, again, the Lion of Damascus. You will find a lot of appreciation for Assad.
Yeah, again, there's a lot to unpack. I think one way to kind of summarize things is to say we're all hippies now, in a way, right? We're all hippies now. You've got a little bit of postmodernism in all of these various kind of new movements. And you mentioned BLM at the start of this episode. There was a version of Black nationalism or Black something or another, like the Nation of Islam, before postmodernism, and they said things that kind of sound like a lot of today's, right-wing fringe people. They had beliefs about saying like the whites were invented by accident in a scientific experiment by a Black scientist. Some of them said like aliens landed here and dropped off white people who are now ruining the world. But some of their other beliefs were about a glorious past, right? They said, "Oh, us Black people, we had a glorious reign, and then white people, cheated and connived." So, but today BLM and sort of Black identitarianism is largely influenced by postmodernism. It's largely led by a lot of women, from what I've seen. So we definitely see like postmodernism and a lot of like new left elements in a lot of the landscape today. By the way, in the chat, the guy whose question we answered is saying BAP is the real Russian troll. Hard time taking him serious. Rucka, you sort of a troll too, though. Now, this guy, I think I recognize him from other chat rooms. He's been going around saying that I'm alt-right or that my comedy appeals to the alt-right, which just shows you the way that rationalists live their life. They put puzzle pieces together in their mind without actually looking at what's in front of their stupid face. The only comments I've ever gotten from the alt-right are calling me a Jewish rat. And the vast majority of feedback I get from people is by benevolent people who clearly get the joke. I mean, this is the type of stupid people we have to deal with, unfortunately, and it's only going to get worse. But yeah, this guy. I mean,
I don't know the guy, but just to give him the benefit of the doubt, could it be that he's saying that as a comedian, in a way, you do the same thing as BAP does, which is mock and ridicule the powers that be?
Yeah, that is what he's saying, and somebody can definitely dislike comedy. And my comedy in particular, someone can definitely dislike it. Many people do. Many objectivists disapprove. And that's definitely a point of view that somebody could have. But to blur the line between something that is clearly designated as comedy and tends to reach people on in that way. People of various different beliefs gravitate towards a certain type of comedy, as opposed to what it is that we're seeing in the world, which is this blur between actual facts and fiction, like having people who they'll never let you know if they really mean it or not. Obviously, that's not what you get with me. There is a time to be serious. There is a time to search for clarity. So, yeah. Anyway, this is sort of the theme, like you said. It's killed by laughter, right? It's it creates an inability to communicate. That's why, like, anarchists, a lot of them, obviously not all, but from what I've seen, people like Michael Malice love Donald Trump. You would think an anarchist would dislike Trump more than anyone if they see Trump as sort of a push away from rights being protected. But obviously their end goal is anarchy. Their end goal is for the government to fall apart and there to be none, there'd be no government to speak of. So that's kind of why I see a lot of anarchists sort of gravitating to Trump, or why they like Trump. They love the fact that he's made communication nearly impossible. And that's what we're seeing on the right. They're not just making arguments. And again, we're all hippies now, right? We're all sort of in and out of focus, sort of saying kind of things. Now, you get a little bit on this show when I speak a little bit tongue in cheek, which can confuse a few people. But by and large, I definitely try to bring a serious, or not serious, a clear approach to understanding and unpacking things.
When you said we're all hippies now, we should and we will do an episode about the other very, very, very interesting phenomenon on the fringe right, which is Curtis Yarvin, the so-called Mencius Moldbach, because he really has this Southern California, bit hippie type of style. Also very, very interesting phenomenon in the fringe right. We're going to have another discussion. A lot of people put him on the same debate with BAP, but I think that's for another discussion. So there's so many things we didn't touch upon, and we need to do so in Clubhouse. BAP's view of the left as a biological phenomenon, BAP's view of women, and BAP's take on Trump and on right-wing populism of the kind of uncultured and stuff. Some very interesting things there. So to sum up my points, it's obvious what is wrong and what are the bad things in BAP. Again, this has been exhausted elsewhere. I'm not interested to do this here, but I think we gave you the cue of what is wrong. But what I find interesting is that this message that says we live in a world of ugliness, and here I give you an alternative of beauty, an alternative of, have a nice body, work out, be out in the sun, eat steak, whatever, which again, notice, you get these things from not only from BAP, but from Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan. And I'm saying this as a good thing, right? There is self-development is a good thing. So he's marrying a bit of self-development, a bit of this idea of this generation of lost boys, a lot of anti-left, anti-PC thing, a lot of weird theories, alternative history, alternative theories, and he's packaging these things together in an interesting, playful language, which is why I think this book has been an internet sensation, again, on the fringes. And if you want to oppose some ideas, first you need to understand them. And that's what I saw as being the aim of this episode today.
And that today, more than ever, we need to emphasize the positive. I'm sure a lot of the people sort of close to BAP or in BAP have read Ayn Rand. So it's not like reading Ayn Rand is going to miraculously solve this problem, but it's a great way to start. Please read Ayn Rand, read her novels. Some of her early, The Fountainhead, you can sort of smell a little bit of Nietzsche. in there. So maybe that's a good way to sort of understand. Nobody's telling you to renounce your values completely. You have something is pulling you towards this sort of image of a conquering man. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but what's your version of that? I would ask everybody watching. What's your version of conquering? For me, it's lyrical and it's video editing. Somebody else, it's actually, chopping down trees and building stuff. Somebody else, it's writing a book. What's your version of mighty Bronze Age man conquering? But there is a big difference between like glorifying a shitty past where life was miserable and short and you're very unlikely to succeed at anything, as opposed to being able to pursue your happiness, your purpose in a civilized context, which is exactly what we're hoping to preserve. Anyway,
time to move to Clubhouse.
Yeah, let's jump over to Clubhouse. Thank you all for joining us. Sorry the super chat didn't work, but at least this way nobody can accuse us of grifting and of being motivated by money, which would be the primary thing that people would bring up. And with all that being said, we're jumping over to Clubhouse. Thank you, Nikos. Always an honor or an opportunity to learn from you, because you actually go out and read stuff more than like comments on the internet. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Nikos, do you